All right, folks, I'm just headed to the office. I got the Insta360 going. It's Friday. And depending on how this video uploads, you'll potentially see little Vinny and Vito in the window behind me. Super cute. Okay, let's go. Topic today is from something that was submitted from an engineer on LinkedIn. I think this is in my opinion, a very important topic, like pretty relevant. And I would imagine many engineers, probably maybe not at the junior level, but when you're going from mid-level, senior, and especially beyond, you'll start to notice that this becomes probably like increasingly important. So we're going to talk about trying to convey business value, business impact in the work streams that we have. And just want to make sure that I can turn out of here first, and then I'll start going. But it's probably a good opportunity to remind folks, if you want questions answered, you can submit them in the comments below, or reach out to DevLeader on social media. That's also my main YouTube channel. And you can send me a message. I'll keep it anonymous. And also a reminder too, if you want your resume reviewed at the time of recording, there's no paywall or anything. You can go to my main YouTube channel, DevLeader, look for the resume review playlist. If you watch the beginning of a video, it'll explain how to submit your resume. And at this point, not paywalled, but if there's increasing demand, because it costs me money to edit those videos, I literally lose money to edit or to review your resumes. But I think it's valuable, so I want to make sure that I can try doing that for folks. So, with that said, let's talk about conveying business value. So I'm not going to go into the specific situation that this engineer is kind of going through, because I'll try to keep that part, I don't know, like more generic, I suppose. And the idea is that they're working on mostly, I would call like a platform slash, not quite DevOps, but like internal tooling. Like, it's going to affect productivity of engineers. And when I was chatting with them, they were describing to me that they're having some difficulty in terms of, they're saying the metric that they have is sort of challenging. And the reason that they were saying to me the metric that they're using to try and convey like the importance of this is challenging is because it actually is like a bit of a moving target. So as they make progress, the metric that's being used is shifting. And so they were describing this to me, and I just want to be very transparent, because I've already kind of chatted with them on LinkedIn to go back and forth on this. So I've already said it directly to them, but in their situation, I do think that they're working on a project that I would consider having a lot of business value. So I just wanted to make that very clear. But when they're trying to explain it, or why they're having challenges to me, I was saying to them, I think you're missing the point, to kind of put it bluntly, right? I think that when you're describing having, sorry, I have to wave someone on here. This person thinks I'm letting them go. You can watch in the Insta360. I'm literally not waving them on, but whatever. You can go lady, it's fine. I'll just sit here forever. This light ahead is out, so it's kind of crappy, and my camera just fell off the ceiling. Let's put that back on. Suction cup power, everything's going wrong. This road is going to be an absolute, pardon my language, shit show. But let's see. Sorry for the disruption here. Oh my God, this road is such a disaster now. Oh my God. Okay, couple more seconds here. Let me get through this, just because I want to make sure I'm paying close attention. Okay. Well, at least if the Insta360 doesn't fall off my car, you can see what the road looks like. They've been working on this for a little while, and if you're looking at the road itself, you might see like they have these huge metal sheets on the road. Like, this whole thing has got to be torn up. I can't imagine, like, they can't leave it like this. And I can't imagine they just try to patch the spots. Like, the whole thing has been torn up, and you can see I'm about to drive over another spot. Like, you're not going to go patch this. Like, you need to repave this entire thing. It's a nightmare. And there's potholes everywhere anyway. Okay, we're through that. So the metric that they're talking about, when I'm hearing them talk about this metric and that it's moving and that's why it's challenging, and because they're saying, like, I can't do a good job kind of conveying the significance of this project, right? And I'm going, like, I just think that you're talking about the wrong metric, to completely blunt. So the metric that they're describing is very much an engineering metric. It's a count. It's a count of things. So I know I'm kind of being very generic here. I'm trying to think if I can just come up with other random examples, but you could talk about a count of dependencies that your code base has. You could talk about a count of repositories that are in your code base. If you're familiar with like C# and .NET development, you could be talking about just a count of projects, right? It's a count of things. And what they're saying is that they have this count, and as they're making progress, that count, they'll uncover more things and that count will change. And they're saying that's why I'm having a hard time conveying business value. And what I'm saying is, I think even if you could perfectly predict that count, that's not going to help you convey the business value. Because the count is not something that anyone cares about at all, except the people that are doing the engineering work, because they'll understand what that means. Anyone else from a business perspective is not going to care about that number. If I went to my CVP at Microsoft and I said, hi, I'm doing this project and we're going to reduce the number of repositories. We're going to reduce that from 100 to 5. I don't think she'd give a shit. She'd say like, or how much effort's that going to be and what's that going to get me? Oh, it's going to take a year, and it's going to take a full team of 10 people, and it's going to take a year. And what does it get me? Well, we'll have fewer repositories. Like, this is the challenge, right? Like, the metric that is being used is not a useful one. Let's get away from that guy with the trailer. God. And when I say it's not a useful one, it's not a useful one for the audience, right? It's a useful one for the people working on it, because that's what they're going to be looking at. And for them, it might be a measure of progression through the project, but it's certainly not conveying business value. So when I was talking with this individual, I was trying to find ways where it's like, I'd go back to them and try to ask them essentially like different ways to try and get them to say what the value is. And it's and I don't mean to pick on this person because it's a very common thing, but they would put a lot of effort into the response, which I appreciate, and they would elaborate further, but they're still elaborating on that number and how it's being measured. And I'm going like, maybe I'm not being clear when I say this, but like, I'm trying to tell you that I don't give a shit about the number. So like, again, I understand from an engineering perspective exactly what's going on, because I actually do fully understand like what this person is trying to accomplish. Like I get it. But what I'm trying to show them is like, the number that you're telling me, it has no significance from a business value perspective. I need you to think about the outcomes of this, right? So it's a really challenging exercise, because I would go back and I would say, no, like, tell me more about the impact this has, or tell me like who cares about this, right? And it's like, well, people should care about this because if this number goes down, then and then they would give me like another answer that's not like a very tangible business impact. So I'm going, okay, I need to find a way to try and explain to this individual that it's not that you're telling me bad things or wrong things. Like you're literally justifying things, which I think is great. The problem is that how we're communicating that is not effective. Again, it might be effective to me as another engineer, as a, I understand the space they're in. So like I said, I get it, but I don't need you to justify it to me. I need you to think about justifying that to someone who is thinking about the business. So, and to be totally transparent, the last part of our conversation, I'm not totally convinced I left, because I had to start working. I'm not totally convinced I left that conversation at a point where I was like, I think this person, or like I made a breakthrough with them. And that's not a fault of theirs, right? Again, trying to be transparent here. I'm not picking on this person. I'm trying to spend time with them to explain, like, pretend I am, your manager or your manager's manager, like someone who's in like more senior leadership that needs to fund this project. Pretend I'm that person. How are you going to convince me that there is value? Like, why should I invest into this? Right? This is a challenge because as engineers, we always think about the technical implications of what's going on, right? But we're engineers working in a business. So what do businesses care about, right? So one of the last things that I had said to them was like, okay, let me go one step back. Not the very last thing, but one of the last things I said to them was try to see if I could make them step away from the pure engineering language, right? And maybe this wasn't effective, but my train of thought was like, okay, how could I make someone step away from engineering language? Well, think about some people that you might talk to that have no idea what you do for work, right? You know that you can't go, at least for my mom, I couldn't talk to my mom and be like, yes, like I'm gonna have fewer repositories or we're gonna have even fewer lines of code. She would be like, I don't know what you're talking about, right? She might be excited for me because I'm excited about it, but she's not gonna understand. No offense to my mom. I love my mother. My father might get it a little bit more because he's worked in tech, but like, he might, I think with my father, he might kind of be like, oh yes, I totally get it. And he probably wouldn't really. Ooh, something on the road. So I was like, okay, like imagine you had to tell your mother or father that you're working on this project for work and you want to tell them why it's so beneficial for your company. And again, I don't know, maybe this person would repeat the same thing and say like, I'm driving this countdown to some number and therefore that's the benefit. Maybe, and like, I would say, okay, well then we still need to work on the communication. So I think my framing with that though is trying to get them to step away from the technical part. The technical part is valuable for the people that will be working on the project. We have lots of different stakeholders with big projects, right? We have the people that are carrying out the work. We have people that are trying to help coordinate the work. There's going to be potentially different teams involved that might have different responsibilities. So you have to kind of like partition the technical information to the different groups. But then there's going to be people that are more focused on like business, or they're trying to think about how parts of the organization are operating, and the level of technical depth will be reduced and the level of like business impact will be increased in terms of what they want to focus on, or their level of understanding of these things, what they care about. So the next part that I was saying to this individual was like, okay, you could probably, I didn't give it that much thought, but I was like, the few things that come to mind that a business would really care about are going to be money, time, and risk. There's probably other ways to slice this, but these three things came to mind. So what I had said to them before kind of having to shift gears and start working was like, you keep talking about this number and how it's a moving target, but like when it comes to time, risk, or money, tell me about that. Like, as someone who might be a business stakeholder that needs to fund this, like, those are the things I care about. Are you helping me de-risk things? Are you helping us save money or create more money? For time, right? Like, if we're going to be investing resources into this, like either people or money, or both, because people cost money, if we're doing that, are you going to be reducing my time for other things? So we put in, I'm just going to make up an example, in terms of like human hours, we put in 1,000 human hours into this, but going forward, we're going to save, 2,000 human hours every year. And just making something up, right? So you're trading something. We're trading some time and money, and that means we're going to be able to move faster going forward. Then I might try to rationalize that investment. So I had said, like, those are 3 things I want you to think about. And I mean, obviously, if you can think of more, that's great. But again, from a business perspective, I don't care about number of repositories, number of dependencies, specifically number of lines of code. Tell me about those 3 things and how they relate to the business. So in one of their messages, they had hinted at like being able to save time. So they were, again, we're talking about some internal tooling, that kind of thing. And they were saying, for an organization of like, I think the number is like 350 people. So assume like, let's just round up to 500 people. There's going to be 500 people that can potentially be impacted by this positively on a regular basis, and it's going to save them time in one of the steps that they have to do for 500 people across an organization. Okay, like, I think we're getting somewhere now, right? You're talking about the scope of the impact, right? The scope of the impact is for an organization of 500 people, and this is just one slice of things, by the way, one way to look at it. But for an organization of 500 people, they're going to save some time. Awesome. Okay. How much time are they going to save? Right? Like, and on what? Because I think that now you're getting somewhere. So let's assume it's 500 people and we're talking about build infrastructure, okay? And let's assume a build takes, I'm just going to make shit up, right? It's going to take 3 hours. So it's going to save 500 people on their builds that take 3 hours. It's going to reduce things down to 1 hour. So their costs have been reduced to 33%, or like a 66%, 67% savings. Okay, and how often are they doing these builds and waiting on them? Well, every day. Okay, so you're telling me that 500 people every day are wasting 3 hours, or at least have potential blockages for 3 hours, and we can trim that down to 33% of the time. Okay, now we're really getting somewhere. Now, there's some nuances to that, like, okay, what is that actually blocking people, right? If they had, because it's not necessarily work is being done serially all the time. You can do things in parallel. So one might argue, okay, that's not actually having that much of a positive net effect because it's not like the critical path of people's work. But even if that were the case, it might give people more agility in their work. So imagine if you were at a company and you were used to builds taking, just going to make something up, a build takes a full day. So a work day is 8 hours. Let's say a build is going to take 8 hours. Always nervous to drive by cops. I don't drive crazy or anything, but I just saw a cop and I'm like, is he gonna pull out? So let's assume a build takes 8 hours and you're at a company and you just get used to it taking 8 hours. You get your work done and you're pushing your changes up and you're like, well, I gotta wait 8 hours. You would probably change how your development looks such that you would say, I'm gonna make sure that before I leave for the end of the day, I'm going to push things up so the build can run, right? 8 hours overnight, I don't give a shit about that. I'm going to come in the morning and it's going to be ready. And you would kind of change your working schedule and your working habits around this. Now, I'm not saying that's good, by the way, but if that's how things were, you might change your working habits. But if instead, if I said, hey, like we can make that build only take 20 minutes or it can take an hour, whatever, now you have a lot more agility or flexibility in how you're doing your work, right? You don't have to say, okay, I'm going to schedule everything so that at the end of the day I go push it up. No, you could be pushing up stuff, over your lunch break and then getting the build and then you're good to go. So that's a little bit harder to quantify, but at least we're able to start talking about potential time savings if it was a critical path and the scope of people that it's going to affect. Right? That's one part. In this individual's situation, he was also talking about de-risking from a technology perspective. So being able to talk about an organization in terms of their technology being locked in. So having a huge dependency that is, their tech stack is tightly coupled to some third parties' tech stack. And at any point, like they could be at the mercy of, that third party being like, we're closing shop, or we're going to start, putting a licensing cost on this. So they're saying, because this dependency in this technology is so great that it is risky. Furthermore, there's apparently, I don't know all the details, but they say there's apparently examples of this third party doing some of these things before. So it's not just like totally like, oh, it's a conspiracy, they could do it. It's like, no, there's been some evidence that they operate a little bit like that. So, come on, what's going on here? So there's another whole aspect, right? We're talking about time savings. Now we have this story that could be de-risking, and de-risking can be hard to quantify as well. But I think we have to talk about like the significance of some of these scenarios, right? So I'm just going to make up an example. This technology is so intertwined that if they were to put a licensing cost on this that was like per seat, then we would look at how many developers or how many build sites are using this, and we could estimate like this is how much cost could go up based on some other data, right? Like if they were to make their licensing $1,000 a year per seat, like we would be paying this much. So like you could be looking at things that way, but the point is that from a business, being locked in could be pretty scary. Again, you lose agility. You could have associated like financial costs. This one might be a little bit harder depending on based on who you're talking to. But trying to explain that like you're locked into a technology, and that would mean if there's more advancements. I'm just going to make up a totally random example. Imagine that you were a business and you decided at some point in the business's past, we're going to make our own database engine, and it's going to be great. So you build all of your products using this database engine, and everything's extremely coupled to it. And then at some point, like 15 years go by, and someone's like, look, man, like, I don't know why we're using this database. Like, there's a million other options that are like highly optimized. Ours is like kind of ridiculous. It's like homegrown. It's always buggy. It's slow, but like everything we have uses it, and it's super. Sorry, I've got to move over for people. And it's super intertwined. Like we can't really do anything about it. Like that's a risky spot to be in, because it means from a technology perspective, like what are you going to do? It's going to be really hard to refactor things. It's going to be really hard to, if you're like, we want to unlock new performance gains, or that could be even integrations with other systems, you might say it's going to be so much more complicated to do, and that puts us at a risk, because when these opportunities come up that we would want to take advantage of, we can't pivot to them. We'd have to invest so much more at that point just to be able to do it. That's a risky thing, because we're unable to have business agility and take advantage of opportunities. Cool. Like, I think that could be a really interesting story, right? So at the end of the day, I think that as engineers, like, I get it. We have our mind on the things that are technical, they're in front of us, they might be quantifiable to us. They make sense from how we would think about progressing through things. But it's a huge opportunity for people to improve this skill about thinking about communicating to your stakeholders. Soft skills, right? And I'm not saying, I just want to be clear, like, I don't think that the person that was messaging me, I fully believe they have a solid project. I think that they're a very intelligent person. So I don't mean for any of this to come across like, oh, this guy's a dummy, he doesn't know what he's doing. Absolutely not. But this is such a good opportunity to be practicing this, right? I think he's got a great project, something that does have a lot of impact, and let's find a way to get him to convey that business impact. And like I say all of this, like he watches the videos. I'm going to send him this video, right? I'm not literally not trying to pick on him or anything. I'm trying to use this as a generic example to walk through like why this kind of thing is so helpful. So for you as in general audience, it might be very helpful to consider like, okay, let's park, like you might have in your mind why something's important, okay? But let's park the technical aspects of it for a moment and then think about it. If you were running a business, goals of a business are going to be to generate money, right? There is a customer that you are serving. Customers will pay money for value. And then in the end, the business makes money. That's how people are able to get their salaries and businesses grow. That's fundamentally what businesses are doing. So it's not enough to want to focus on projects. You might think a project is really cool because it's interesting to work on. There might be some technical aspects to it where you're like, this is exciting for me, or yes, we get to use newer technology, but just being able to use newer technology does not necessarily mean that there's a positive business element to it, right? So if we think about the cost of the investment that goes in, right? It's going to take 2 years for us to finish this. And the gains are going to be that every year we save 100 hours. It's like, well, that might take us X number of years to go recoup our investment. And then there's this opportunity cost where we could have been working on other shit. So no, like, even though, yes, you're proving a benefit, and yes, there is some business value, relatively speaking, the business value is not worth it. So I think it's really important to be able to think through this stuff. And I think sometimes that's why, like a really common one that I know developers get stuck on and get pissed off about is like tech debt, right? There's a lot of frustration. We don't get time to address tech debt. No one lets us do it. We don't get to schedule it. Everything's falling apart. The code base is spaghetti. Product managers don't understand. My engineering manager is opposed to tech debt. It's like, what are you, like, when you're trying to tell them the significance of addressing that tech debt, what are you telling them? This code is really messy. Who gives a shit? This code is hard to test. Who gives a shit? What's the impact of code that's hard to test? Well, it's always buggy. Well, is it? That's legacy code that's been running for 10 years. And like, what are the customer reports for bugs there? Extremely low? Okay, well, don't touch it. Like, we're not investing into that. Right? You have to start thinking about these things from like a business impact. So just because code is messy, if you're not going back to go iterate on that code to go add more features, or because it is bug ridden and customers are complaining about it, why are you spending time trying to go clean it up? It's probably not a good use of time. I'm not saying that the code can't be cleaned up. I'm just saying that it's probably not a good use of time. And I think that's really difficult for some people to get. But then they're unable to understand, like, well, they get frustrated. Like, I don't know why it won't get prioritized. It's because, unfortunately, a lot of the time, and I'm not saying this is universally 100% of the time before people get too triggered. Unfortunately, a lot of the time, people just have a really difficult time trying to convey the impact of it, right? It's legacy code, it's hard to work in. So what? Oh, you want to go add these new features for this part of the product, and guess what? They're all in this space. It's actually going to take us, significantly longer to be able to go even introduce these features, and because that code's all untested and it's a critical part of the code base, we're actually going to be highly at risk of introducing bugs to that critical part. And unfortunately, because there aren't tests, we're not going to know until that code is being, exercised at scale. And so again, risk, right? Time. It's going to take us way more time. But if we were to invest some time up front, we could actually shorten the time. Maybe not for this first set of features, but you said you wanted to keep investing here, right? So the future features will also go faster. So a little bit of upfront cost, but we're going to de-risk significantly and allow us to have more speed going forward. That's a more positive story than the code is spaghetti. So anyway, I hope that helps. But yeah, we have to think about how we're messaging business value to stakeholders. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care.